All right. Well, welcome everyone to our final edition of the Dallas Fort Worth Power Platform User Group Meetup, which is the December edition, and we hope to see you all again next year. And today I'm very excited to have my super talented colleague, Paul Huggins, join us. He is a trailblazer in the field of AI and ML, whether it's diving into generative AI or mastering traditional machine learning and everything in between. Paul is always at the forefront of it all. So today he's going to be showcasing one of our very early prototypes on automating social media content collection, filtering, analysis, and building your own personalized content generation. So stay tuned to learn how the solution has been evolving and get ready for an exciting discussion tonight. And before we get started, just a couple of intros. I am Geeta Selim. I'm a practice lead focusing on Power Platform and Fusion Dev at Lantern, and I'm also a business applications MVP. Feel free to follow and connect with me on LinkedIn. I often try to share my trials and tribulations, as and when I find time. Ben McMahon is my colleague and a principal at Lantern, and he's also the co-founder of the user group. And today, what we're going to do is quickly run through some of our recent announcements. I've kind of picked like our top recent announcements since the last time we met. And then we'll hand it over to Paul so he can walk us through his showcase. And then we'll open it up for open forum where we can take questions and talk about any comments that you have or any features that get you excited and things like that. All right. The very first feature that I want to talk about is the approvals kit. This is a kit from the Power Cat team, which is the customer advisory team that was very recently released in public preview. And one of the most common key use cases that we see across every industry and every department is approvals. And the Power Platform allows you to streamline your businesses by digitizing the approval experiences. And this kit is built on top of Power Platform components. So it allows you to configure sophisticated approvals. You could have conditional branching, delegation, admin overrides, and thus empowering organizations to do more with less for approval needs. So approvals kit is a template that is based on standard approvals connector, but takes things to the next level by leveraging the power of Power Apps, Power Automate, and Dataverse. So you will need both Power Apps licenses and Power Automate licenses to support, specifically the premium licenses to support the designing and managing of approvals. But as an end user, you could still use the seeded license to, use any of the core functionality, but you may need your premium Power App licenses if you want a more integrated experience, specifically like displaying approvals history and things like that. So do check it out, and I will drop a couple of links in the chat for you guys after we're done with the announcements, so you can take a look at it and review it in your tenants. The next feature here is the ability to edit environment variables. So the ALM team has just recently released a change that allows makers to view and change the values of a Power Platform Solutions environment variable when you're using pipelines or solution import for deployment. The old experience, if you're used to doing solutions, you'd know that it'll conditionally hide the environment variables if there was a value already available for them. And sometimes this can be confusing, and it could add ambiguity to how the environment variables were obtaining their values in the first place, and then kind of limits the whole environment variable update experience. But now makers will have the ability to validate those values that are going to be used in their components, such as apps and their target environments. An important thing to note here is that next month, the default experience that you have today will no longer export environment variable values in your solution, in the sense that you would have a toggle like how you're seeing on that screenshot over there. You can use that toggle to say if you want to export the value or not. So it does make it easier to follow best practices and avoid any unintentional mistakes. And then that the toggle over there kind of just helps you have that whole opt-in experience to exporting values if needed. And this is a huge step forward for environment variables, making it more easy to use and keeping it more transparent so you can follow best practices with ALM. Our third announcement here is Canvas offline apps. So you are now able to have Dataverse images and files supported in your offline apps. So this is in public preview. So files and images from Dataverse are now supported in your offline Canvas apps. It's always critical to give access to files and images to frontline users, especially like when their devices are not connected to the network. And so, when they download files and images, it can usually take a long time or it could be a longer process. It can also take up a lot of space on the disk for the device. One good example would be like when you have a sales rep who's browsing their catalog of products and they want to create an order. They typically want to see them in high definition, pictures of those products so they can, put that forth in front of their customers and make decisions. And sometimes they need to access, more detailed specifications. So this solution here would be very helpful for those use cases. So in an offline enabled Canvas app, you can now either allow your files and images to be downloaded on view, or they could be at the time of sync. Now, with these two modes, you can decide the strategy, what's the best fit to download files and when you would want to download files. So you can optimize the whole usage of your disk size and space, depending on the business needs for the end user. Our last announcement here is the Azure Key Vault credentials. So desktop flows, which is called PAD, Power Automate Desktop Flows, which is our version of RPA, that now has a new credential manager in public preview. So it allows you to have a more streamlined way to create and manage credentials with secrets stored in Azure Key Vault. So think of it as a centralized repository where you can manage all your credentials in one place. You're able to easily retrieve login information, and you can also share those credentials with users without giving access to the secret themselves. And these credentials are based on the concept of environment variables, so they are ALM compliant and can be exported using solutions. And your credentials and connections using those credentials can be updated when Azure Key Vault secrets are updated. And so, and in turn, you can use these credentials in your desktop flows instead of having to provide a username and password value, all of that manually. So definitely something to check out and keep in mind as these features are coming our way. But yeah, I'm very excited to hand it over to Paul. I can't wait to see what he's got to showcase here. It's all yours, Paul.
Thanks, Geetha. Well, I like how we have a small group tonight, so feel free to ask questions throughout this. The more engaging and the more feedback we can get, I think it'll be more fun for all of us. So I'm going to kind of walk through this. I'm actually going to go off camera as well, just so I can keep the bandwidth up. So let me kind of talk through what the idea was behind all this. I'm very much into AI and keeping up to date with all the things, like Geetha said, kind of being the practice lead for AI at Lantern. I really need to stay engaged with what's going on in the industry, stay engaged with LinkedIn, all the different social media sites out there to keep a pulse on what's going on. And what I realized throughout this is it's not possible for one person or for me to just constantly sit on LinkedIn or any of the websites out there and read articles. So this whole process that we're going to talk about really stemmed out of a need and a desire to automate things, to make it easier on myself, easier on our team, easier on Geetha to stay up to date with the latest news, and also create content off of that catered to us. So with that, I'll start sharing now, and I'm going to kind of walk through this at a fairly technical level, but also kind of come up for air every once in a while. So I wanted to show this. This is really kind of just the very, very 40,000 foot architecture behind all of this. Essentially, we're going to use a combination of Power Automate, Power Apps, Azure OpenAI to do a few things. The main one being to basically monitor and track a bunch of different social media or mediums out there of news, relevant to us. Use some Power Automate flows to essentially filter through that and say, is this relevant to me? Is this interesting to me? Catered to each one of us here at Lantern. And then from that, take the output of that and send everything to a Power App that sits on top of a database, where we can then go in and craft content for LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever we're really wanting to generate content for, through a UI in that regard. And then you see kind of in the bottom right the little icon of multiple people. This is not solely just used for marketing. This is also used so that we can pass information to our teams. So if news comes out that we want our team to know, we can easily kick it off to a broader audience to make sure that everybody is up to date. So some of the things that we're going to see inside of this is basically very specific prompts in Azure OpenAI that are trained to write like me, to create some of this content. We also have Azure custom voices as part of this that we trained to sound like us. So not only is this creating textual content for people, this is also creating audio content, very customized to how we write, how we speak, how we sound, all those things. So kind of at a high level to walk through what that looks like. So what I'm going to do now is kind of walk through this flow. Like I said, this is a very high level diagram for everything, so it's not all encompassing, but it kind of gets the point of cross for what we're trying to do. So I'm going to start first with what this looks like, of kind of the RSS feeds on this. That's what we're going to focus on mainly for this is LinkedIn and RSS. I'm going to skip the Twitter piece of this, but kind of focusing on this RSS feed path through the system and then to LinkedIn. So let me get this guy up. Let me see. So really, it all starts with kind of the feeds that we're monitoring, things that we want to keep track of. This is an example of, OpenAI's RSS feed. So when the news came out about Sam Altman being let go, I instantly had that in my inbox, minutes after it happened, if not sooner. Same with really anything else that we as practice leads, people that are interested in this, want to know about. So you can see this is all just a pure XML file inside of this. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to read through all this and determine a few things off of that. Now, what I'm going to show here is built for myself and the AI team here at Lantern, but we also have this built out for our other practices. So Geetha, Power Platform, our Power BI practice, and our data engineering practice. So if I can show this briefly, this is just kind of the URLs that we track. There are other things that roll into this, but focus mainly on the RSS feeds. You can see we've curated a list of ones that we are interested in, that we really want to follow and stay along with. So for Geetha on the Power Platform side, really is interested in these 6-7 different feeds out here, that she has curated and are custom designed to feed her information. And then the same with our other areas. Really just kind of curating that list of sources, just like this OpenAI one, that we are interested in. What I'm going to show tonight is really kind of our version 1 of all of this. We've had a couple iterations off of this, but I think from a showcase standpoint, I think this is really kind of good to show what we started with in that regard. So like I mentioned, we have a bunch of these RSS feeds out here that we are interested in. They're all obviously different formats, potentially different ways that this is categorized inside of each specific one. What we're really going to do, and I'm going to go over to Power Automate now to show kind of where all the magic happens for this. We have a few in here, basically feeding to each one of our different practice leads. This has also been consolidated. You can see down here to one knowledge base, so it feeds everything instead of having 4 separate flows. But for the sake of this, we're going to walk through it just this one, to see kind of how the framework of all this lines up. So let me jump into here, and we can take a look at how this runs. So for each one of our areas that we're interested in, we do have our different schedules set up. I think mine is set to kick off every 15 minutes. I believe that's what I have it on. Yeah, every 15 minutes, my particular flow will kick off to give me any insights about about AI stuff for news that I'm interested in. You're going to notice we have two basically get parameter values here, all connected to some OneDrive files that I have. And the goal for these is to basically prepare the rest of the system to know what to look for. So we're going to first grab our prompt for filtering. So let me see if I've got that one. This is kind of a very basic one that we worked on in the beginning. But essentially, this is going to be the prompt that we're going to feed into to OpenAI. And those of you that aren't familiar with these generative AI tools, you essentially have to give it a reason, give it a task, give it its purpose and what it's designed to do. This is kind of what's called the art of prompt engineering behind it. This one is very, very simple. We have some that get to hundreds of different lines, but for this one, essentially all I want it to do is just filter down. So I'm going to pass it a list of RSS feeds or a list of links that I want it to go look at. And all I want it to do is determine, is this relevant to me? And this can be highly customized. This is like version 1 of all this, but highly customized to specific areas of the world, specific sectors. Hey, I only want to know about healthcare. Hey, I only want to know about financial services, whatever that may be. We have essentially a prompt in here that in my case for this one, for this example, only looks for these specific things. We advise it, don't go into the links. We don't want to waste any time or anything like that. We want it to just basically, look at the header, the title of the article, and determine, is this relevant to Paul or not? Also have stuff in here to stay on, current U.S. news. While it's important, I didn't find it important for this to know about the NVIDIA chip shortage in China. So things like that. I wanted to only focus on stuff that I was close to. And then kind of the tail end of this is basically, if it's relevant to me, give me, the link to go search. If it's not relevant, respond only with no. And, that could be done 100 different ways, but for this scenario, basically tell me, yes, it's relevant, or no, it is not. And that's all we're doing in this one prompt for this, filtering. Basically, I want to get my system message first and then go from there. The second prompt that we have in here is basically getting our summarization prompt. So if we determine that an article is relevant to me, I want this thing to go ahead and summarize it for me. So I'm going to hop over to this one now. All this one is going to do, like I said, these are very, very simple prompts. Let me zoom in one, actually. It's tiny for me, so I know it's tiny for you. I want you to go in here, and you're going to be given a JSON object. If you're not familiar, these GPT or OpenAI systems work very well with structured data, depending on the model. So I'm telling it right up front, you're going to get a JSON object, and we're going to see where that comes from the Power Automate side. But you're going to get a JSON object. Your job is to go into here, read the content, and give me a summary of that article. Notice this is not, fine-tuned to how I would write or anything like that. This is purely at this point just to give me a summary so that I can read it if I want to. And that's all we're really doing in these first two steps, is just going through that. The next step inside of this is essentially to reference this Excel sheet that I showed a second ago, this RSS feed source, where it has our list of what we're interested in. Basically, go to that Excel file, and then for each URL or for each RSS feed in this list, we want to basically process everything inside of that. So what's going to happen is we're going to open up, for example, this OpenAI feed, and we're going to look at a few things in here. We're going to look at 1, the publish date, and we're going to look at 2, the link behind it. So the reason behind that is if it was published 6 months ago, I should have already known about it, or it's old news, especially as fast as the AI world is going these days. So I want it to really only pick up things that are recent, and I want it to pick up things that I don't already know about. So we're going to go back to this, and basically this condition right here that you see at this step is doing that check. It's saying, hey, 1, have I already heard about it? Do I already know about it? And 2, when was it published? Is it recent enough for me to care about? And how it does that first check of do I already know about it is we have essentially, at this point, an Excel sheet stood up for it that goes through and looks at everything that we've already processed. So this is not in the right order, but you can see we've already processed all of these things. Let's not go back and reprocess them. So this list is now, I don't know, hundreds of lines long of things that we've processed. But we do that check right here to say, have I seen it yet? Maybe, maybe not. Is it new? Maybe, maybe not. So if I have already seen it, or it's 6 months old, or a combination of those, we essentially just skip over that and say, all right, I know about it. Let's not worry about it. If this is new to me, or if it doesn't already exist in my database, we're going to basically make another call into here. And I'm not going to open this one up purely because we, from our V1, have our OpenAI keys posted in here, and I don't want those published throughout the web. So we're going to make an Azure OpenAI call right here, basically to go in and filter again to make sure that it is still relevant to me. This time, go into the link, determine if it's something I care about. The steps after that essentially are just formatting that response. So if you've worked with Azure OpenAI before, you get a JSON response back when you're not working with it in the sandbox environment. So essentially, we're going to get that payload back in a JSON body. We're going to go through that, filter that appropriately, and format it once again. And if we've determined kind of through the flow steps here that yes, it is relevant to me from way up here. No, I haven't already seen it yet. And then yes, after going into this link and analyzing it more, this is still of interest to me. We're going to keep going down this path, where now we get into kind of the tail end of the Power Automate piece of this. So we've met all of our conditions. It's still interesting to me, still relevant, what's going on. This is when we get into the summarization part of it. So at this point, I showed you the prompt a few minutes ago, but we're going to go in here and summarize the content inside of that link, inside of that URL, to give us a very detailed description of of what's going on and that we care about. So that's what's happening in this step right here, where we can go in and summarize that content, and then, like I mentioned above, kind of parse through those, and at this point extract out just the summary of that particular article. And the tail end of this is kind of two steps here. One, it sends me an email. So I'm going to pull up this guy. I get an email like this that comes straight to me if we've met all this criteria and it's still relevant. So it takes me directly to the link. And actually, I can pop this one up because it's not anything. There's no keys inside of this. Takes me directly to the link of that article, the web app we're going to talk about in a second. And then I mentioned the summary that came off of this originally. This now gives it to me right here. So I can go in very quickly and say, yes, this is interesting to me. Let's go forward and create some content about it. Or no, thanks for the summary, but I don't really want to do anything with this. And it basically gives us that output right here that we can make the decision on if it's worth pursuing or not. So from a Power Automate standpoint, I kind of want to pause here on it, but this whole process ends with me getting a customized email saying, hey, here's what's going on. It also sends me, or it also adds a row to our database that we can then check later on to determine if we've seen this article or not. So with that, kind of before I go on to the next piece of all this, are there any questions or thoughts that you guys have after this little brief intro on it?
Yeah, and everyone, feel free to unmute yourselves and and share your thoughts, because it's a pretty small group here. Or if you'd like, you can drop a question or comment in the chat as well. But Paul, we don't have any in the chat so far. But yeah, anyone? Fernando, did you have something to say? I see you went on.
Yes.
To interrupt me.
So how many emails do you receive in a day? And could you talk a little bit about the cost? I know it's very small, no? You are not using too many tokens, so it should be a very small amount.
Yeah, it's a great question. You're correct. I've optimized the prompts behind this to to bring down the token count for all this, which is why we don't go into the URL multiple times and all that stuff too. I get roughly, I don't know, depending on, so the day that Sam Altman got fired, I actually got like 6 emails that day because they were just dropping things like crazy across all the sources that I follow. But on an average day, I get maybe 1 to 3 emails. And that's covering a very, very broad spectrum of sources with a very highly specific prompt. So I think if I were to have, a more ambiguous prompt, I could probably get 20 emails a day if I wanted or more. But really, it's really not, just kind of 1 to 3. And then, yeah, from a cost standpoint, I know from an OpenAI perspective on this, I think it cost me like $2 a month to run this entire system because the token counts are so small. And just for determining if it's relevant in a summary, I don't need GPT-4 for that. I can do that on 3.5 or a cheaper model because all it's doing is just checking relevancy. It's not really providing me anything from a marketing standpoint.
Yes, that's nothing, and that's only for the OpenAI, Azure OpenAI standpoint. The premium Power Automate licenses is different, no?
It is, and Geetha, I might tap you on that one of how the premium pricing might work for something like this.
Yeah,
It's a premium
because
connector, right?
it is, yes, because we're using an HTTP one. It is a premium connector, but right now it's just one account. It's not running under the context of every user wanting this. It's just it's a single process that scales and distributes the content for all those who want the curated content showing up in their inbox. So it's essentially one premium license.
Nice. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, and I see the comments on the new designer versus old designer. I built it on the old designer, and then when I opened this up today, it defaulted to the new one. So I need to get more familiar with that one anyways. Let me see. So that pretty much covers, I think, the Power Automate section of this. So referring back to our diagram here, we've kind of gone halfway through this process of relevancy. And now let's get to more of the Power App and customization side of all this. So let me close a couple of these guys out. Awesome. So this is a very rough version of kind of what our Power App looks like for this. It's designed to not be overly technical. It's designed to be really easy to use for all of our team as they see fit. So what we have on the left side here is essentially that Excel document that I showed that had all of the news articles that we got from Power Automate. It populates that, and then we can basically display that back here to get a list of everything going on. So if I'm interested in, whatever this one was, the 4 trends that changed AI that came out today, we can see what that looks like. Here is a summary directly from that table, so we can go in and look at it more if we want to. I think, Fernando, to your question, we can actually see. So I got 1, 2, 3. I actually got 5 emails today, a few on the 18th, nothing on the 17th, 3 on the 16th. So it's not really, it's not consistently a bunch, but we can see, anywhere from 3 to 5 a day in that regard. And I have all these set up to go to a specific Outlook folder in my mailbox so that I can have that not go straight to my inbox and get crowded. So we could go in here, and for anything that we're really interested in, we have a few options inside of here. And I'm going to talk through what those are before I show how the flow works to create the content for all this stuff. Since this being our V1 of all this, kind of our phase 1 that we tested everything out on, we have a 1 creativity slider in here. And if you're familiar with the OpenAI parameters, essentially there are 2 that control this. So it's temperature and top P. But what I wanted to do, because this is going to be used by our broad user base, I didn't want to give everyone all those different levers and confuse the teams. I think it's much easier just to give them a creativity slider that controls both of them, so that they don't have to worry about, oh, where do I set temperature versus top P, or do I this, do I do that? The goal was to make it very streamlined and easy for non-technical users to use in that regard. So how this slider works is it controls both temperature and top P at the same time. So if I want a highly creative, it's basically going to set temperature at 0.83, but it's going to apply a factor to top P. So it's not one-to-one. Through testing all this, I found what I thought to be a good balance of distribution of what each one should be. I didn't want them both to be 0.83. I know the documentation says don't change them both at the same time. So I know that might be a big hurdle for some people. But having worked with these tools for a long time now, I say a long time, it hasn't been out for 5 years or anything like that. But since these have really come onto the forefront, I feel like I found a good balance of how to adjust them by weighting one or the other. So in this scenario, creativity might be 83, top P might be 87 or something like that. They're adjusted to a certain degree. We also have the ability to change medium. So do I want to post a LinkedIn message? Do I want to do a Twitter thing? Do I want to do a blog? Whatever that may be. We have different mediums for that. And before I dive into that, Jared, I want to answer your question because I think it's directly related to this. So creativity determined, yeah, exactly, Fernando. If it's super low, I want it to basically only use concepts or ideas that it sees in the article. If it's super high, I want it to be more abstract. I want it to think more outside the box. And you may hear a lot of the time hallucinations. Generally, the higher this number is, the higher likelihood for hallucinations, where essentially it makes up content that goes along with that. Another way to think of this as the lower you set this parameter to, both temperature and top P, the more grounded it's going to be versus more creative. And to kind of give a little example of that, temperature in this scenario controls basically how broad we want it to think in a way, and top P really controls how do we want it to think broadly. So there are two different ways to adjust creativity, but for this basic application, it's give me something that users can just easily slide back and forth. So I want to talk about the LinkedIn one for a second. Unfortunately, I can't show any of the stuff, any of the hard code behind that. But I want to talk about how these are set up. So if I can jump back to this and highlight this guy right here. Part of this whole process was if you are reading content on any one of these sources and you've been working with these large language models for a while, you can pretty much spot what's fake and what someone actually wrote. I often feel like the more that I interact with these tools, I can spot AI content from a mile away. But for people who have never used them before, it may be harder to spot. So what I wanted to do in this was essentially fine tune with some fancy prompt engineering and pseudo train a OpenAI model to write like me, because I didn't want it to sound robotic. I didn't want every single LinkedIn post to sound the same. I wanted there to be variance, writing in my style. So I want to talk briefly about how this was approached and how this was kind of accomplished in that regard. So in the Azure AI sandbox for all this, I essentially passed it in one, a lot of the content that I'd already written. So LinkedIn posts, emails, whatever I thought was relevant to how I wanted the writing style to be. Obviously, I didn't pass in all my business emails because then it would write like I'm writing an email. I tried to give it a good breadth of here are LinkedIn posts that I wrote, and also here are LinkedIn posts that I like how someone else wrote this. So I really liked the style they used. I liked this this format they went with. Same with putting in people that I was interested in following. So we have kind of a different way to approach this. One being content that I've written, content that other people have written, and then 3, people that I'm interested in following. So kind of more thought leaders in the space. One of them in particular was Mark Andreessen, if you're familiar with him. He has a very specific writing style that I wanted to take bits and pieces of to mimic in how I write. So the output of all this information that I fed this model essentially gives me a very, very unique prompt that is catered to how I write for each type of medium. So if it's for LinkedIn, I have a very, very specific prompt that takes into account all the things that I just mentioned and gives me a very unique writing style for me. So it has the ability to not only learn how you write, but also if I give it a person like Mark Andreessen or somebody like that, these systems already know who those people are if they're, you know, highly regarded, highly thought of thought leaders in the space. So I could put in, I want you to write like me, how I did in these LinkedIn posts, but I also want you to bring in some of the self-deprecation or humor that Mark Andreessen brings to the table, and essentially really refined that prompt for what I wanted to sound like on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it may be in that regard. So what I have, basically going back to the Power App now, what I have inside of that is if I were to hit LinkedIn here, it would write something like me, basically pulling the prompt that I have defined for that specific medium and create that content for me. So that's how we come up with each one of these 3 different things. I did the same thing for the other sources as well. So there's a separate prompt for LinkedIn, a separate prompt for Twitter, and a separate prompt for blog posts in that regard. If we were to hit create content here, it would give us that. For this demo, I don't have the specific, you know, me prompts inside of there. These are kind of generic prompts that we have for demoing the solution. So I'm gonna go ahead and just click create content on this. Let it think for a second. I don't like that at all. Let's try this one. We're still on LinkedIn? We are. So you can see this is like a demo prompt that we have to highlight it, but we can see what that looks like. And basically just clicking this button and then it'll give us the prompt behind that, or the prompt, excuse me. It'll give us kind of a LinkedIn thing that we can use for that. How all this works is this button essentially kicks off a separate flow inside of Power Automate, where we bring in these variables. So these variables are going to be the creativity slider that we have. Essentially, we're going to have the URL that we want to summarize and write something about. We also have the medium that we're writing to, and then what's the last one? I think creativity we have split into 2, so we can just look at this. Temperature, top P, so basically breaking out that creativity slider, the link that I want to go look at, and then the medium that we're writing for, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever that might be. Similar to the other flow that we saw, we have our HTTP call on this, and I won't show it again because our keys are inside of this for the demo, but an HTTP call to Azure OpenAI to say, hey, build out this JSON object with this parameters inside of it. Here's the system message that I want you to use based on the writing style, based on the medium. And then here is the URL that I want you to do this on. And essentially this call right here makes that and returns to us that, you know, in this scenario, the bad, I know, right? Give us your keys. I'm trying to avoid that. The bad summary that it gave me here, but for demo purposes, the summary that it returned back for me to then, you know, parse through and then give us this response back to here. So essentially all building, passing in the information from these to give us this summary here. Do the same thing for either one of these is how that's built. Now, one thing you're probably noticing in all this is there is no, you know, one-click button to post to LinkedIn or to do whatever that may be. And there is a purpose and a thought behind that. I believe that there still needs to be some level of human review before this goes fully out to the world, whether that be for, hey, I just didn't like how it did this time, or I want to turn this into an audiogram instead of a textual-based thing. But one thing that we talked about was, do we want this to constantly just push things without us reviewing it? And the answer to that was no. So the only real manual process in this is basically copying this out and scheduling out our LinkedIn posts off of that. And I'm going to hop over to that now And while I do that, I'm going to talk through how this works. Actually, we'll do this first. I want to go through the voice piece first. So let's say I did a blog post or whatever, and I liked what the content was behind it. And I want to, instead of doing, a straight blog post that I want to publish somewhere, let's make this into an audiogram, something that we can post somewhere else. So that keys in really on the Azure custom voices behind it. And what we have here, if you're not familiar with it, the Azure AI Speech Studio, where you can basically use pre-trained voices that are custom inside of Microsoft, or you can train your own voice to sound like you. And essentially, that is what I did inside of here. So to talk through this briefly, you can create your own custom neural voice is what they call it. And there's a couple ways to do it. The first one being, which I did here back in September, you can walk through and record yourself saying each one of these scripts, and it will build a voice off of that for you. In regards to cost, this is, fairly cheap. To have a voice that sounds like you. Only took 20 samples, but obviously the more you give it, the more realistic it sounds. I'll say for this one, just having these 20 or 50 or so samples in here, if you've never heard me before, you probably believe it's a human. If you hear me talking every day, you might notice there's some inflection differences, or I know one of the things it says AI very differently than I say AI. It kind of gives it like a little AI, a little uptick on it or whatever. So some of the words that it say don't sound totally like you, but you would never know that, or you would never know that about me had I not already said it. The second way to do this is a much more in-depth process where you essentially provide it with like 30 or 40 hours worth of you talking. And it's a lot, but if you're like us and you record all your Teams meetings, I could easily just feed this thing back into the system. But you can build a fully custom voice on it with, dozens of hours of you speaking. So that is one path that you can take. Tried that. It is quite expensive, frankly, because then you have to host that model somewhere. But if I wanted to turn any of this content that we've seen here into an audiogram or an audio content, we can just take that out, take it into our neural voice, and build MP4 file or whatever straight off of that. So that's one way that you can also get to it. In our later versions of this, we do have it built out to where it says, create me an audiogram, create me this, do that. But for this, you can essentially just copy that and paste it into here to do your audiogram.
Where do you publish audio?
Excuse me?
Where do you publish audio?
I've done it on LinkedIn a bit. I've done it on some podcasts. I don't have it on Twitter. I'm not big into TikTok, so I don't even have a TikTok account or anything like that. But we use them internally at Lantern. Essentially, if you follow our Lantern page, we'll have Lantern minutes with so-and-so speaking. Some of those have been AI generated for those people as well. And I can show that in a second. But what I wanted to show, let me see, is kind of what this looks like in practice. So I've got my LinkedIn pulled up here, and I want to show you kind of what some of these look like. So let me go to one. So this one right here, 5 or so days ago, I didn't write any of this. This was all AI generated from the system that I just kind of walked through the next versions of that. So you can see this thing is built to not only handle emojis appropriately. I'm not a huge fan of emojis, but I think in some cases like this, where we are offering up different bullets or categories, they're good. It also can do bolded text. So one thing that's hard to do in LinkedIn right now, there's no default way to bold your text. You have to go to like a third-party software called Yay Text, I think is the one that I've used before. But we can have it format it any way we want as part of our prompt. We can have it give us bolded headers, give us what this looks like. So essentially how this process works, was, first off, I got the email saying, hey, this came through. Are you interested in this or not? I went into that email and said, yes, this interests me. Let's go write a post about it. Went into the newer version of what I showed you guys from a Power App standpoint. Clicked give me a LinkedIn post. And immediately I fired it off using my custom prompt that writes like me, using the parameters that I have built into this to write me this with hashtags, with emojis, with all the text inside of here, the bolded, even the question up top. The system is designed to have flexibility in what it does so that every post in this doesn't sound the same. There is some variety in these, or else everyone would pick it up and immediately say, hey, this doesn't look like a human actually wrote it. So I won't go through all these, but just to kind of show what some of these look like, they're all, about 90% of these were AI generated. 10% of them so weren't, but the bulk of them are basically fed straight from the system that I showed, along with the one that I did just a few hours ago. Even for these longer ones, that this one in particular was highly technical. It was not like a high level one. It was very, very detailed. This was AI generated based on the parameters that that we had designed for it. One thing I know that's changed in regards to kind of the speech side of this is the GPT-4 Turbo also has the voices that go along with it now, and I think those voices are really good. And one thing that I might consider doing is using some of those voices that they have built in to do some of this quicker and easier from a content development standpoint. But essentially, this took what used to take me, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 hours a week of just aggregating and looking at content, took this down to essentially minutes of, hey, I got an email, this looks interesting, let's create some content about it and let's post it. So it automates not only the collection of information, it automates the filtering of that to what's relevant to me. It then automates, creating the content off of that, whatever medium I want to go to. And the only thing missing in the automation, like I mentioned, is the automatic publishing of it to those mediums. But for now, I like having that human element in there, just so I can kind of keep control and governance on what's going on. So I want to take a breath and get a drink of water and see if there are any questions from you guys on anything that we just kind of covered through here.
I don't
No
see any
questions from me.
in
It just
Yeah.
sound watching your demo, that is pretty incredible.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, this was fun. It started as a pet project for me to make it easier. And then I got Geetha involved because I hit my limit of what I know in Power Apps and Power Automate. So I was like, hey, Geetha, how do you do this? So Geetha's been really instrumental in getting a lot of this stuff going as well. And then we've broadened it to a larger audience at Lantern, to not only create content, but also disseminate content throughout, so that everybody that's interested in data engineering can subscribe to this and get instant news on what's going on, and they can choose to write their own content, choose to do nothing about it. But it's a great way for us to pass content through our organization in that regard.
Especially like in this world of technology that evolves so fast, it's really challenging to kind of crowdsource all the content out there. There's so much out there every day. It's just hard to keep up with everything. And this solution is definitely a brainchild of Paul's that, kind of is super helpful for all of us, because we don't have to go out there looking for what's coming our way. We just get it straight into our inbox, and you have the flexibility to pick and choose what you want to get curated content about, and makes it a lot more easier to digest content. And then if you are interested in sharing the knowledge and maybe your thoughts and comments, then you can use the Power App here to kind of create that content and add your own flavor to it. And it's definitely very productive use of your time. So you're not only learning what's happening out there, but you also have a way to make it easy to have personalized knowledge sharing out on social media. So thank you, Paul. Thanks a lot for sharing this. This is amazing. And I think I saw someone post on the chat about give us your keys or something. I'm sure everyone wants their hands on this solution.
No, it's a great idea and great use of AI. Very nice. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks. Yeah, I see your question too, Fernando. Why do I use Excel as a database? Frankly, in the beginning, my naivety, how you ever pronounce that? It just seemed the simplest for me to get up and going, to show the value behind it. But since then, it has been migrated to more of a standard like SQL database that we can track all this in. And I think, Geetha, we were playing around with even using Dataverse for it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of
Yep.
options. But from a simple, just get it up and going, OneDrive to Excel was the easiest for me.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of, creative and innovative add-ons, if you may call it, that we can add on top of this solution, right? Like maybe make our backend to be more scalable, and then maybe have a front end that people can add the feeds that they want to subscribe to, and manage that on their end, make it a lot more easier to have your own personalized knowledge base set up. But yeah, this is amazing. We still have a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions and you would like to, share any thoughts or any other ideas that you have.
Following specific, I'll say, content creators on different social media, LinkedIn, and different members of the Microsoft Cat team, it's kind of surprising that no one's. I mean, honestly, I'd be surprised if people are not using not this exact mechanism, but other types of mechanism to use, like Copilot and things like that, to generate content. Because like you said, I mean, this saved you from 7 hours of work down to minutes, and that has a lot of value. I'm following specific content creators. I'm thinking, reading their posts and stuff. How do you have time to actually create this much content? So great demo, and I love following.
Thanks. Yeah, I know it's funny to see too on LinkedIn. I think you can easily tell, oh, they just threw this into OpenAI and got some content out of it. Because yeah, I agree. There's a bunch out there where I was like, you didn't actually write this. So it's kind of fun to look at that. But you bring up a good point, Jared, and I think, Geetha, I think something that we can talk about too is, where does Copilot fit into all this? Because essentially what I built is like a marketing Copilot. But at what point, where does it become easier and better just to kind of build your own Copilot through Azure? And I think that's kind of what we're thinking about now.
Yep, definitely.
So.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for taking the time to showcase this amazing solution. And we're all using it. Like, I'm using it on a day-to-day basis. We have a couple of other of our colleagues using it as well, and it's very helpful in the sense of, you don't have to change context, and you get everything in your inbox. And I have like rules set up on my inbox to move them to a folder that I want, or even I'm thinking that eventually I want to like have a way to flag or categorize some of those articles that come my way for to be read later, and things like that. So I can allocate time every day, maybe 15 minutes or something, to read through it. So that's definitely something that I'm looking to do on my end, just to make it more productive.
Definitely.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul.
Sure thing. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join this meetup today. And if we don't talk before that, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and a very happy New Year to everyone. And we will see you all again next year. And thank you for the support. We look forward to catching up with everyone in 2024.
Thank you, you too. And goodbye.
Thanks, Geetha.
Bye,
Thanks,
y'all.
Paul.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.